as we get them. But we now move over to Europe, and Ukraine has proposed direct peace talks between President Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin, with US and Turkish leaders also present by the end of August. Kyiv's lead negotiator said this was the top priority as Russia and Ukraine began their third round of talks in Istanbul. Let's have a listen to what Rustem Umerov, Ukraine Security Council Secretary, had to say.
Number one is to organize a meeting of the leaders of presidents, where participation of President Trump and Erdogan will be most valuable. We propose to the Russian side to hold such a meeting of leaders until the end of August. By agreeing to this proposal, Russia can clearly demonstrate its constructive approach to everyone around the world, including our partners.
But Moscow's envoy said the sides remain far apart, though they agreed to continue contact. Let's listen now to Vladimir Medinsky, the chief Russian negotiator.
Ну и, естественно, мы долго обсуждали позиции, изложенные нашими сторонами в меморандумах, переданных в прошлый раз.
We also had a long exchange on the positions of the memoranda that we had exchanged last time.
Позиции достаточно далеки друг от друга.
The positions are quite distant from each other.
Мы договорились продолжить контакт.
We have agreed to continue our contacts.
Как на уровне делегаций, так мы надеемся оперативно на уровне рабочего.
Well, this comes as Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan urged both parties to end the bloody war quickly and praised prior talks for achieving prisoner exchanges and laying groundwork for ceasefire discussions. We'll now have a listen to the Turkish Foreign Affairs Minister Hakan Fidan.
Amacımız bedeli bir hayli yüksek bu kanlı savaşı bir an önce sonlandırmaktır. Kere turunda temennimiz tarafların teati ettikleri muhtıralar üzerinde öze dönük ve sonuç odaklı istişareler gerçekleştirmeleridir. Nihai hedef elbette ki barışa giden yolu inşa edecek bir ateşkestir.
Well, joining us to discuss these diplomatic efforts that are ongoing, Madhav Nalapat, the editor of the Sunday Guardian, joining us live from New Delhi. Professor Nalapat, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. This is somewhat expected, of course, both sides still remaining far apart on particulars in a ceasefire deal, similar to what we've just spoken about with the Israel-Hamas conflict. But it does seem that diplomacy will continue, with Kyiv pushing for talks between the leaders of Ukraine and Russia. Do you think that this talk and this direct discussions, a third meeting between the nations in recent months, has any significance towards a potential peace deal?
Well, I'm seeing something which I never saw before in the Western media, which is criticism of Zelensky. Zelensky has been going after the Anti-Corruption Bureau in his own country, and there are widespread reports, published reports in Western media. I'm not talking about Chinese media or Russian media, but Western media, which have so far been cheerleaders for Zelensky, that, this is a wrong move, he should not have done it, and there should be an investigation of corruption. And, what is he covering up? So I think, frankly, that Western, the electorates are getting a little tired of funding this war. I mean, President Trump is sitting pretty. The Europeans are paying the cost of the weapons that he is supplying to Ukraine. And so he is sitting pretty. He's laughing all the way to the bank. But the fact of the matter is that the European public is getting a bit fed up of this kind of expenditure on a war that apparently seems to be going nowhere. So in
Professor Nalapat, sorry to interject. I'm conscious of how much time we have, and I do want to briefly focus on these talks that have happened and try and dissect them. Of course, with no clear progress made on a ceasefire deal, what more could be needed in this instance, with a seeming impasse lasting for every single one of these three direct talks which have taken place in Istanbul?
Look, don't expect a Zelensky-Putin discussion, because the fact of the matter is that Putin believes Zelensky is not a partner in peace. Zelensky wants a ceasefire to try and regroup, to try and replenish his weapons. He's not interested in stopping the war, and the Russians know that. So I would be very surprised if they agree to a Putin-Zelensky meeting. They've agreed to lower level meetings, and that's mostly for prisoner exchange on both sides. And I mean, the very tragic, situation of soldiers dying on both sides, and an exchange of the remains of these soldiers on both sides. So I don't expect any other development out of these talks. And Zelensky, Putin, well, I don't think the Russians are going to agree to that, because for them, Zelensky is not a partner in peace. And increasingly, from the comments that I've been seeing in Western media, I think the Western media also getting a bit tired of what was called in the past endless wars, and this endless war in Ukraine. So my own view is that they're looking at an alternative leadership in Ukraine. So I would only like to say that as far as the Russians are concerned, I don't think they're going to stop. They're going to continue until they achieve their focus, which is that Ukraine should not be in any way a threat to Russia, which it very well will be if it joins NATO, because then any attack by Ukraine and the Russians then, if they attack back, then the Ukrainians can argue that NATO, but of course NATO has got the right of self-defense. I don't think that that doctrine applies if a country launches an offensive on its own. We saw that in wars like Iraq and other places. But I'd like to say that I'm not very hopeful of this kind of talk leading anywhere. But I do hope that the family of these tragic, victims of the war will get, will get the remains of their loved ones back, and I do hope that then they will be, with full dignity and with all the rights associated with that they will be laid to rest finally.
Yes, Professor Nalapat, let's move on to that, because we have some more information.